This is the multiple award-winning GardenDC podcast, the podcast about everything gardening in the Washington, D.C. and Mid-Atlantic region. I'm your host, Kathy Jentz. I'm the editor of Washington Gardener magazine. Our content is aimed at gardening enthusiasts, people who grow everything from edibles to ornamentals, natives to exotics. If it grows in our area, that's what we talk about. Welcome to episode 220 of the GardenDC podcast. In this episode, we talk with Serenella Linares, mycologist and facility director at Mount Rainier Nature Center, all about lichens. The plant profile is on blue Vervain, and we share what's going on in the garden, as well as some upcoming local gardening events and this week's garden tasks in the What's New segment. We close out with the last word on cultivating chaos from Christy Page of Green Prints. This episode, we're joined by Serenella Linares, and she is facility director of the Mount Rainier Nature Center and a mycologist. Welcome, Serenella.
Thank you, Kathy. I am honored to be here with you today.
Great to have you on. So we're going to be talking all about lichens and that mysterious kind of quasi-plant community that they are part of. But before we dive into all of that, we like to ask our guests here on the GardenDC podcast, were they born with a green thumb and chlorophyll in their veins?
I wish. I did not. I wasn't born with a green thumb at all. But I had the pleasure of witnessing how my grandma worked with the plants in her garden and how she appreciated all the nature around her. And I was inclined to go behind her, always following her footsteps and learning about the world outside of our door. So it was really usual to see us walking together and talking about the trees that she had or how the seeds of the plants that she had in the garden mimicked different things in nature and in human lives. I also remember very vividly a little seed pod that when you peeled it, it looked like a baby wrapped in a blanket. And really, when I was little, my toys were the things outside. So it was a lot of fun to follow in my grandma's footsteps.
It's so wonderful to have a garden mentor like that or somebody to share nature with you.
Yes.
And where was it that you grew up?
Oh, I grew up in Puerto Rico. I spent the school days in the metropolitan area in the town of Rio Piedras, and then the weekends and holidays with my grandma in the town of Barceloneta. During the weekdays, I learned in school and had a very urban type of life. And then during the weekends, I had the privilege of running around and exploring grandma's backyard and learning about all things nature. So it was a very interesting contrast when I was growing up.
That's wonderful. Sounds like the best of both worlds.
Yes.
And so what led you to a career with plants, so to speak?
Well, after having all those moments of joy in my grandma's backyard and looking at tidal pools in the shore in Barceloneta, it was just natural to follow that curiosity. And I like to share a memory, a core memory, if you may, where my grandma and I are by the shore in Barceloneta and we saw a shrimp. And she asked me, what is the shrimp doing? And I said, Grandma, I don't know. And I asked her, do you know what it's doing? And she said, no. But what I do know is that you're going to grow up and learn all about nature, and then you're going to come and teach me. So from that moment on, my path was set. My grandma became my first teacher and my first student, and she will hear all the adventures that I was learning first in school and then in college about the nature that was around us.
And so, as your current position with Mount Rainier Nature Center, I know that you're passing on a lot of those nature lessons to the children of the community, but adults as well.
Correct. It is a deep joy for me to, at this age, be able to share some of those hands on experiences that I had growing up and more of the experiences that I've had even after then. It is a great pleasure to see the oohs and ahs of discovery on people's faces and how even the adults have that childlike spark of discovery in their eyes when they see something new. And thankfully, the kingdom fungi has lots of mysteries to be shared for with everybody, both in the garden and outside in the forest.
And we'll get into some of those in a minute. But first, we have a lot of listeners outside the Washington, D.C. and Mid-Atlantic region, all over the world, and they're probably wondering where Mount Rainier is. Can you describe that and kind of the growing conditions of your area?
Yeah, so the Mount Rainier Nature Center is in the city of Mount Rainier, and we are in that border between Hyattsville, Maryland, and Washington, D.C. It's a very urban nature center. Um, and thanks to that initiative of connecting people with nature, we have just planted about 100 trees. So we are very happy to share those with the entire community. So if you were to head on Queens Chapel Road, really close to the West Hyattsville Metro Station, we are right there by 31st Place.
Mm-hmm. And for those who visit the DC area or live in the DC area, they probably might know where the U.S. National Arboretum, that neighborhood, and you're kind of north of there. You kind of follow the river, the Anacostia River.
Correct. We are really close, about 7 to 10 minutes away from Bladensburg Waterfront Park, which is right by the Anacostia River. We're a little bit south of there. I mean, I extend one of my feet and I'm already in Washington, D.C. We're really, really close.
Yeah. And I would say you have, zone 7, heavy clay soils, probably a little bit more moisture being near the river, and also a lot of old growth trees or older trees in some of those, inner neighborhoods.
Correct. We have some pockets where we have really old trees, and even here at the center, in the very center of the building, we have a sweet gum that it's of a decent size, so probably 50, 60 years it's been growing here. And there's some really nice size trees that are through the neighborhood as well.
And the Mount Rainier Nature Center is under Prince George's County Parks Department.
Yes, we are part of the Prince George's Parks and Recreation Department.
Yeah, because I know Mount Rainier has its own city government layer as well. And there's a lot of green initiatives going on in that small town or city, which are great to watch and see. I'm not as familiar with the full history of Mount Rainier, but I do think it was established as one of those commuter trolley towns that was like a spur from coming out of DC.
Right. I do not know much of the history of the city. I really have to brush up on that. But I do know that the mayor of the city is very conservation inclined and has established some projects outside of the grounds. Inside of our grounds, it's park and planning property, and we have also been really intentional about being a model of sustainability for the residents of the area and beyond. Our main focus is to model how humans and wildlife can live together, and how by being sustainable humans can also have a better quality of life. And some of those initiatives are the rain gardens that we installed outside. We have a learning garden area with raised garden beds so anyone can come and observe and participate of programs that teach people how to take care of their gardens all year around. It's a program that happens on Sundays, 2 Sundays out of the month, and it's called Green Hand Gardening. Our senior park naturalist, Madeline Doherty, is here to ensure that people have a connection with the gardens that they can establish also back at home.
Excellent. I think that's a great initiative. And I think the last time I was in Mount Rainier, I did check out some of the local community gardens, and it was wonderful to see the participation in those.
Absolutely.
So let's turn to the topic of this episode, lichens, and that's Lichen, not Liken. Something that we like. But the world of lichens, let's start off maybe with a general definition of what is a lichen.
Well, a lichen is a community of microbials that are living together in a nutshell. Basically, I like to describe this relationship as a triad where you have the fungus, a filamentous fungus that is making the structure that you see, what's called the thallus of the lichen or the body of the lichen. Then you have a photobiont. It's either an algae or a cyanobacteria that lives in the tissue of that fungus. And that role, the role of the photobiont, is to capture the sun rays and turn that, in addition to carbon dioxide, into sugars. And then there's a third organism, a cook in the kitchen, if you may, that is a yeast. And between these three organisms living in harmony, then you have what we know as a lichen. Once the lichens are established, then they become a community where other microbes can colonize the tissues and live in that microbial community as well. But at the base of the symbiotic organism is the filamentous fungus, the algae, and the yeast.
Wow. I had no idea it was three separate parts coming together. So how do those three things find each other?
Well, it is by chance, if you may. Of course, they are living in similar environments. They like similar environments, but it is when they come together that they can thrive as a single unit. Three organisms in one. And what we know in order to be able to classify them is that we take the name of the fungus in the relationship and apply it to the lichen. So the systems that we use to name fungi are the systems that we use to name lichens.
Interesting. So it's only the one attribute of it that gives it this name.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm going to ask the question most gardeners who are probably listening want to know, and that is if they see a lichen on one of their trees or shrubs growing, is that a reason to panic?
Absolutely not. Panic is never good. It's really not a good condition for the human mind to be. Lichens do not harm the tree. It's just using the tree bark as a substrate for growth. Now, lichens, to be able to thrive, they need a significant amount of light. So sometimes when you see them in the forest and you see a tree that has a lot of lichen on it, is because that tree has lost a significant portion of the canopy, allowing the lichen to get light through an area that normally will be covered by leaves. In your house, if you have a tree that is at the edge of a forested area, you're gonna see lichens on the bark just because that edge property, it's allowing more light to filter through and hit the bark of that tree. So the lichens are really not doing anything to the trees. It's just a secondary thing where if you have light that is coming through in more quantities than usual, then you're going to see lichens on that bark.
Mm. And I think that's a great indicator too for the home gardener, that where they do see, like you described, that edge habitat and where lichens are appearing, that could be where there's more light available for growing underneath as well in the garden. So not as deep shade. And I do notice on some of the beautiful lichens that I see out in the woods or in somebody's garden, it tends to be more on a horizontal limb, like long, low, almost
Mm-hmm.
growing, but more the ones that are almost laying flat rather than a vase-shaped tree. So things like dogwoods seem to be more that shape that lichens tend to, I'm going to say, rest on or live on.
Yeah, it's really where the light is. I don't have a particular um, data that says one tree is more likely to get lichens than others. It's more what the shape is of a particular area and how much light is it receiving. You may have a tree that at the bark or in the trunk has no lichens, but rest assured that when those branches get tall enough and long enough, they are exposed to more light. And depending on the environment, that would be very conducive to have lichens. One of my favorite things to do is to go to a forested area after a storm, because the storms tend to prune the trees and all those dead branches will fall and you can see lichens that were not at your height or you wouldn't think that were in that area, but the storm just made them available for you to see.
Yeah, that's always so fun to come across some of those lichen-covered branches on the ground, and sometimes they'll have other mushrooms or fungus growing out of them as well. And one observation I was going to make is that I have a lichen-covered bench at a local park that I love taking photos of. I just love the patina and the look of it. And so it's an old wooden bench, so that leads me to believe that lichens don't need to be on living tissue, because
Correct.
obviously that bench has been, probably there for 20 years.
Correct. They just need a vertical substrate. As long as there is enough light, they will grow on rocks, on benches, on the tombs. One of the favorite walks that the Mycological Association of Washington, D.C. hosts is a lichen tour of the Rock Creek Cemetery. And you could see many lichens growing on the tombs just because they just need substrate and light and water, and that's it.
Does sound enchanting. I'm definitely going to have to go along because I would love to take photos of those stones covered in the lichen and all those patterns and beautiful colors they make. So in my mind, I'm picturing kind of the celadon color lichens, those, pale green and grays. But
Yes.
I know that lichens come in many different colors.
Yes. So in our area, the most common color is that blue-gray type of lichen, but we also have some very interesting yellows and oranges. And if you go a little bit south to the Carolinas, you might even see some red.
And so are lichens actually beneficial to our ecosystem? Do they serve any ecosystem purposes?
Well, that is a very interesting question. In older times, some of the lichens have been used as medicinal treatments. Lichens like the usnea or the bearded lichen have been had been used medicinally. Um, they tend to hold in there's some lichens that grow on the ground in sandy soils, so you can hypothesize that they are that first growth that starts to hold down the soil and prevent erosion. There's some Cladonia species that you can find in the Calvert Cliffs when you're walking up to the shore. You can see Cladonia lichens holding down the sands as you are walking through. Same thing with the Mason Neck Park. You can see lichens growing directly on the sand. So there might be some of that going on. Anytime where you have a microbial community that's growing on directly on the soil, it's building blocks for new community to come. It's first the non-vascular plants and the lichens, and sometimes in the deserts you have cyanobacteria forming these biofilms on top of the sand where it holds the moisture for a little bit longer, allowing for other plants to colonize what was a very hostile environment and then start the succession of a typical forest.
GardenDC will be back after this short break.
Want to shop Walmart Black Friday deals first? Walmart Plus members get early access to our hottest deals. Join now and get 50% off a one-year annual membership. Shop Black Friday deals first with Walmart Plus. See terms at walmartplus.com.
Get low-maintenance alternatives to lawns with Ground Cover Revolution by Kathy Jentz. Reducing the lawn is among the biggest trends in homeownership, with an endless stream of homeowners looking for an eco-friendly alternative to a traditional turfgrass lawn. In the last few years alone, over 23 million Americans converted part of the lawn to a natural landscape, and now they're looking to do even more. The biggest challenge to adopting this new ideal of the perfect lawn? Knowing how and when to replace your turf, and which plants are the best ones for the job. Ground Cover Revolution is here with all the answers you need, and some you didn't even know you needed. Included are 40 in-depth profiles of plants that are perfect choices for replacing a grass lawn. There are options for sun, for shade, for dry and wet sites, and for various climates around the globe. There are choices that bloom, options that are evergreen, and selections that are deer-resistant. Kathy Jentz has also included an incredibly useful chart that gives you all the specifics on each of the 40 choices for quick reference and to make your ground cover selection process even easier. Whether you want to replace the entire lawn or just reduce the amount of land dedicated to turf, Ground Cover Revolution will help you usher in a new and improved idea of what a beautiful lawn should be. Ground Cover Revolution is available now wherever you buy books, including Amazon.com and bookshop.org.
And so going back to what you said about medicinal uses for some of the lichens, that does bring up whether they are edible, because I had seen, I think it was a Nordic chef who was using some lichens in some preparations, and I thought that was pretty amazing.
Yeah, they don't have a lot of caloric value. What they do have is those secondary metabolites and some minerals that are very conducive for a healthy immune system. It's not all of them, but what we call the reindeer lichen or the caribou lichen, some of those have been used for medicinal value. Yes.
And are other species, aside from humans, consuming lichens?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Reindeer lichen, it's called like that because reindeer are eating it. We also have other vertebrates like squirrels or foxes that in the dead of the winter where there's no other green available, these lichens tend to be more numerous, grow in higher quantities so that the vertebrates, the animals that are around, can benefit from.
Yeah, I was also reading something about some of the bitter flavored lichens were just used as a flavoring, say in beers and that type of drinks.
Oh, yeah, that I am not aware of that, so I will have to look that up. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah, I was like, that's a way to use it. I guess if you can't grow hops, that maybe that makes the bitter flavor for you. But yeah, interesting what humans can adapt. So let's talk about some of those common lichens that we might be seeing in our home gardens in the Mid-Atlantic area. So do you have any favorites that we could start off with?
Absolutely. As a matter of fact, I was seeing one today in my walk around the Chevy Chase Wooden Nature Sanctuary. There is one that I adored that is called Physia milegrana. Unfortunately, I don't know the common name of that, but is a very common lichen in our area. It looks like I would describe it as rivers of blue green that are radiating from a center point in a circular pattern. So the whole patch will be circular or semicircular. And the milegrana Latin name comes or translates to 1,000 grains. And that is because each one of those lichens can have a lot of teeny tiny dots that are called apothecia. And that is the fungus in the lichen trying to reproduce all by itself. So there are two ways that a lichen can reproduce. Either it can reproduce asexually by sending a spore of the photobiont or the microalgae, and that is wrapped around by a filament of the fungus that also has the yeast. That creates a little bit of powder that then gets dislodged or separated from the thallus and flies in the wind, looking for another tree to grow on and create again another lichen. And sometimes the fungus gets a little impatient and it says, no, I'm not just going to wait for all of you to get on board. I'm just going to create my own spores and I'm going to disperse that way. So when the fungus by itself wants to disperse, it will create these discs called apothecia on the lichen. And that's where the name of milegrana comes from because there's so many of them through the body of that lichen. Another of the lichens that I love seeing around are the Cladonias. And there are so many species of Cladonias around us. The common name for the entire genus is the pixie cup lichens. And these are called pixie cups because if you use your imagination and you find one of these lichens, they have, when they are producing their fruiting bodies, a vase shaped to them. So you will see this leafy blue-green thing that's growing on the ground or atop of a dead piece of wood. And then on top of that leafy blue-green structure, you see like a vase or a glass that's also that same color. But at the edge of the glass, there might be globs of purple or brown, depending on the species, that I like to imagine that it's a drop of wine that it's balancing also gently in the edge of that cup.
Excellent. I just pulled up some pictures on my phone, and the one you were talking about, the miligrana, the common name Mealy rosette lichen. So, and
thank you.
You can really see those rosettes when you look at the picture. I'm looking at the Wikipedia page, and I love those little pixie cups too. I think one of the most enchanting thing about lichens and fungus and mushrooms in general are all the really adorable common names. So
Yes.
there's like beard and specklebelly and soldiers, and I'm thinking of that one fungus that looks like little birds' nests.
Oh, yes, that is a fungus. That's not a lichen.
Mm-hmm.
I was actually looking at some today, this morning. We have two very common species in our area. There is the common bird's nest fungus, which is Cursibulum leve, and that has a yellow outer nest and white eggs to it. And each one of those eggs, it's a sac of thousands of spores. And then we have another um, slightly darker species, which is Ciatus striatus or fluted bird's nest. And that one, it's more like gray, dark gray eggs inside, but the inside of the bird's nest, it has these indentations that give the name striatus because they are striations on that bird's nest structure. And the outside of the Ciatus striatus or fluted bird's nest is very hairy. It looks like I don't know, like a mane of some sort of mammal that's covering fur, if you may, covering the outside of that base with very gray eggs inside, sort of metallic gray, that I find truly gorgeous to look at. And as much as they are beautiful, they're teeny tiny. They can be less than half an inch to an inch in diameter and about half an inch tall. But their numbers are insanely abundant. And you can find them everywhere where there is mulch that has been rained on. You are bound to get bird's nest fungi.
Yeah, that does explain where in our community garden we mulch our pathways with fresh wood chips. And I would think, by the end of the year when it's getting, if it's a wet year, not like our drought year this year, then I've definitely seen lots of those little birds' nests pop up. And you're right, they're about the size of a quarter, maybe even a nickel. To see them on the ground, you have to look pretty close.
Yeah. Even with how dry it has been, we got them. Like I have them outside of here, the center. And like I was saying, I saw them outside this morning in Chevy Chase. So if you take a minute and observe the mulch wherever you are, you're bound to find the bird's nest fungus.
And so another one that was catching my fancy as far as fun names is the devil's matchstick. Do we have that?
Yes.
Do we have that one in our region?
Absolutely. I found that one last week, I think. Yeah, that is one of the Cladonia species. And yes, we have that particular one in our region. With these Cladonia species, they're not very big at all. So if people don't usually see them because they are so little and they camouflage so well with the environment. But for the devil matchstick, if I'm not mistaken, you're gonna have to hit those sandy soils that I was talking about before. Most of the cladonias that you're gonna see around here, you're gonna see growing in dead wood, but there are some that are ground growers. And I believe the devil's matchstick is one of them.
And what are some other common ones we might see in this area?
In this area, I like the beard lichen is Usnea strigosa. That one is very fun. You're gonna see that one growing in very clean air areas. So no urban environments at all. It needs very clean air. Close to me in Prince George's County, you'll be able to go to Patuxent River Park. And if you pay attention to lichens that are growing out of the wood, you're gonna see kind of a fussy blue-green thing that it's not flat, but it looks like a little tree is growing out of the bark of the tree in blue-green. That is Usnea strigosa. You can find that in Patuxent River Park, in Patuxent Research Refuge, and I believe, let's see, I found it in Greenbelt National Park, and I believe in Rock Creek as well.
I think I've seen it too, and I think it looks, it's kind of almost like the weeping that you see in southern oaks, those long tendrils, almost very like a tinsely decoration that's hanging off almost the branches, right? Not like clinging or on the surface. Yeah.
Right. It's not as dramatic as the southern region, where you see the very long bromeliads. I believe those are bromeliads. But yes, it's hanging off from the bark of the tree, and it's really pretty. You can Google it. Cladonia strigosa, and that will show you. If you are iNaturalist user, you can also see that in iNaturalist. I love to use iNaturalist for everything that alive, because it not only shows you where, but it also shows you the phenology, meaning when can you find it, which is pretty good. Pretty cool.
That does bring up so iNaturalist, a great source for looking up things and also sharing, but are there other guides or online or in book form that you use to ID lichen?
Yes, ma'am. Lichen ID is something that I'm still working on. I don't feel like an expert at all. There are better experts than me in this region when lichens are concerned. But one of the friendliest guides that you can obtain to learn more about lichens is the book Urban Lichens, a field guide for Northeastern North America. And that is again Urban Lichens, a field guide for Northeastern North America. Most of the common lichens that you're going to find in the greater Washington, D.C. area in the urban environments are listed there. Now, there's another lichen Bible, Lichens of Delmarva, that is the Bible for lichens in this region. That's a little pricier book, but a great source to learn.
So that might be something to look out for at like a naturalist store or some place like that, a specialty store. And you made a great point about the usnea, the old man's beard lichen, that it appears where the air is super clean and usually not in urban areas. Because I heard this myth I was going to ask you about, that where you see lichens appear in your garden means that you have a healthy garden and good air circulation. So is that true of all lichens or just this particular kind?
Well, yeah, most lichens can be used as bioindicators. The more polluted your air, the less diversity you're going to have, because there's only a handful of species that are able to tolerate the pollutants. The thing with lichens, different from plants, is that some of the plants will lose the leaves in the winter. So whatever particulate was accumulated in the tissue of the plant, it gets shed when those leaves are lost. But lichens don't really do that shedding process. They keep their thallus for the duration of their life. So there are many studies that have used lichens as bioindicators of pollutants, particularly nitrogen and phosphorus in the air. And you can see some of the papers taking photographs of nanoparticles that they have accumulated within the thallus of the lichen. So the more air pollution that you have, the more accumulation of those particles will happen, effectively killing the lichen.
Fascinating. So that could also be something in future millennia, that people are looking back at our lichens in our fossil records and knowing, where the pollutants were, what's happening in our atmosphere just by reading the lichens.
Sure. As long as there is anoxic sedimentation that creates the fossils, great. The problem is with the fossils, will there be fossils? At the speed that we are, I don't know.
Good questions to think about. So, where can our listeners contact you to find out more about lichens and your programs at the Mount Rainier Nature Center and other things that they might want to contact you about?
Well, if you want to learn about what we are doing here at Mount Rainier Nature Center, you can go to our general website, which is pgparks.com, and type the name of our facility, which is Mount Rainier Nature Center, and you will be directed right to our website. In our website, we publish the programs, the special events, tours that we can do with the schools, craft Tuesdays, gardening programs, the Sunday gardening program that probably all your listeners want to know about. But also, I am a board member of the Mycological Association of Washington, D.C. And if you want to go in a walk with me, your biggest chance is to sign up as a member of the Mycological Association of Washington, D.C. and see our calendar. So if you want to go to that website, that is M as in mom, A, W as in Washington, D as in dad, C as in Carlos .org. MODC.org. And if you go to the calendar, you'll be able to see all the activities that we have. Once a month, we collaborate the Mycological Association with Mount Rainier Nature Center for the DNA research and Ask a Fungal days. And we are here at the center from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. running DNA research, getting to learn about what mushrooms do we have in the region. And during that time, you can come either at 10 a.m. and bring your samples to be included in the experiment, or you can arrive at 1 p.m. to ask us questions either about the mushrooms that you were finding or anything fungal. From 1 p.m. to 4 p.m. is open table for anybody to come and chat with the experts and see what we're doing and what you want to learn about.
Wow. So those in the DC region, take note. You get to ask the experts directly, and you got this wonderful resource and sharing a lot of your time, Serenella. So that tells me how passionate you are about the fungal world. And before I let you go, I just want to ask about your personal horticultural plant or botany heroes.
I have quite a few actually. So we can start with my grandma. You already heard how an important force of nature she was in my life. That was the start and the force that propelled everything forward. I also enjoyed learning from Eva Davila, who is a professor at Universidad Metropolitana or Metropolitan University in Puerto Rico. She was my botany professor, and I couldn't have asked for a better teacher. Her ability to make science interesting and help us connect with the knowledge and explain things in a way that I will never ever forget. Eva Davila's ability also to identify plants at 65 miles per hour on the highway. It was insane. And every day I hope that I can bring a little bit of that spark to everybody who I interact with. Here in the United States, I have to say Mary McKenna from Howard University. She is a wonderful botanist and ecologist that I learned many of the plants that I know here in the United States from. And Jenny Brown. She was the garden manager at Nature Forward, and I loved Jenny. Jenny was the plant to my fungus. We had a really good symbiosis together. And I relished the times where we went into the learning garden and she was walking in front and then feeding me things. And I love that experience that I'm walking and I'm tasting and I'm smelling and I'm learning all these plants with all my senses together. Like there's nothing better. There's no better way to learn what a plant is than to touch it, to smell it, to taste it. That was a very very important experience to work with Jenny and the inspiration for the garden here at Mount Rainier Nature Center. We planted some species that allow you to do just that. Learn the plants by touching, by tasting, by smelling. And come the spring, I hope that everybody who is in this area comes and visits us because we have two plants that we introduced together so we can eat lemonade.
Well, listeners, please do check that out and visit in person if you are able to. And this has been so fascinating, Serenella. Thank you for sharing.
Thank you for the invitation. I really enjoyed sharing with you. And again, it's such a great honor to be able to share a bit of my passion with all of you, both you as a person, Kathy, and all the listeners. Thank you for that wonderful opportunity.
GardenDC will be back after this short break.
Looking for a pickup truck to get just about anything done? Look no further. The Chevy Silverado EV isn't just the most powerful Silverado ever, with next-level towing capability and technology. It also offers game-changing versatility with the available multi-flex midgate and tailgate, which means Silverado EV helps you carry large, bulky, and oddly shaped items up to nearly 11 feet in length. Chevrolet. Together, let's drive. Visit Chevrolet.com to learn more.
In the book The Urban Garden by Kathy Jentz and Terry Spate, you'll find dozens of inspiring and creative ways to grow flowers, shrubs, vegetables, herbs, and other plants in small spaces and with a limited budget. Whether you want to grow on a balcony, rooftop, front stoop, or a tiny urban patio, turn your growing dreams into reality and build a gorgeous and unique garden that showcases your personal style while still being functional and productive. With the genius ideas and resourceful tactics found here, you'll be maximizing yields and beauty from every square inch of your space. No matter what you grow, the 101 amazing growing ideas found in the urban garden will turn your tiny urban yard into a treasure trove of green you'll be proud to share with family and friends. Buy your copy today at your local retail bookseller or order it online now at Amazon.com or bookshop.org.
Blue Vervain Plant Profile. Blue Vervain, Verbena hastata, is a perennial plant with blue-purple blooms on top of tall flower spikes that resemble a candelabra. It's also known as American Vervain, Simpler's Joy, or Swamp Verbena. It's hardy to USDA zones 3 to 8. It can reach 2 to 6 feet in height and blooms from June through October. It's native to most of the United States and Canada. Its native habitats are moist prairies and damp thickets. It attracts butterflies, birds, and bees. It's the larval host of the common buckeye butterfly, and the caterpillars of the verbena moth feed on its leaves. It grows best in full to part sun in moist soil. Pinch back the top of the plants to encourage branching and a bushier habit. Blue vervain is used as a medicinal herb and is said to cure depression, headaches, jaundice, cramps, coughs, and fevers, among other ailments. It's in the verbena family and is related to lantana and vitex. It's also deer-resistant. Blue vervain can self-seed and will also spread and naturalize through rhizomes. Blue vervain, you can grow that. What's new this week in the garden? Well, the cool temperatures have moved in along with some much-needed rain. We even had a few snow flurries today. The foliage on the fothergilla shrubs is looking beautiful at this time of year. The November 2024 issue of Washington Gardener magazine is out, and it is posted on washingtongardener.blogspot.com. Inside this issue, we have a cover story on stunning Stokes aster. An American potato story, we answer the question, does grass seed go bad? You'll meet the Kaluna flower truck, read gardening books reviewed, and much more inside that issue. In garden tips this week, we shared that you should be checking your evergreens for bagworms and picking them off and disposing them in the trash, not composting them. We also advised that you can sow native perennial seeds on a snow day. Wait for a nice, fluffy, wet snow, not icy or crusty, then scatter the seeds across it. We were invited to see a screening of Gladiator II, and our review is that it's about, I would say, a B+. We're going to give it a B for its entertainment value, but also for its use of plants. There were many plants shown in courtyards around the Roman territories and even some farm scenes. My favorite part of it was the use of sprigs of lavender as kind of a tussy-mussy to kill some of the bad scents that might have been around from those gladiators, we'll just say, some of that body odor. And so one of the ladies holds a lavender under her nose for several scenes, and I think you and I could probably relate to that. I think the only plant they got wrong in the movie was a bouquet on a table, which appeared to be English roses of the modern David Austin kind, and probably weren't around or available during Roman times. We'd love it if you could follow and subscribe to the GardenDC podcast on whatever platform you're listening to us. That could be on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, etc., so you don't miss our upcoming episodes, including one on 2025 garden trends and much more. In upcoming local gardening events, if you are in the greater Washington, D.C. and Mid-Atlantic area, the Brookside Garden of Lights is starting November 22nd, running every night through January 5th, except November 25th to 28th and December 24th, 25th, and January 1st. So the Garden of Lights displays a magical winter wonderland. You stroll through a half-mile outdoor walk-through exhibit and enjoy those twinkling lights and glimmering one-of-a-kind displays and flower beds and throughout the 50-acre grounds of Brookside Gardens in Wheaton, Maryland. Tickets are $10 per person. You can purchase those at brooksidegardens.ticketsauce.com or just Google for Brookside Gardens Garden of Lights. Thanksgiving Day, November 28th through January 5th, is the Season's Greenings display at the U.S. Botanic Garden, and this is free and open to all. They are closed on December 25th, Christmas Day, but otherwise open every day, and a few late evenings in December. They run from 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. The annual holiday display includes multiple model trains in the outdoor gardens. Inside the conservatory, there's botanical wreaths, holiday decor, thousands of poinsettias, and DC landmarks made from plant parts, which is my favorite part of those displays. And you could check out more about that at usbg.gov/season greenings. And finally, on Tuesday, December 3rd, from 9 a.m. to 8 p.m., there's a holiday bus trip to Longwood Gardens being hosted by Homestead Gardens in Davidsonville, Maryland. You can enjoy a festive day exploring the dazzling lights and enchanting holiday displays and stunning fountains and new conservatory at Longwood Gardens by signing up for their bus trip. The price is $90, and you will find details about that at homesteadgardens.com. Happy gardening!
This is Christy Page with Green Prints with the last word on Cultivating Chaos, Confessions of an Accidental Gardener, a story by Marsh Rose. In the heart of deep winter in Northern California, I found myself signing away on the paperwork for my dream home, a quaint bungalow I had longed for. As rain pelted down outside, I was too preoccupied with the legalities to notice the quarter-acre of land beyond the back door, a mishmash of mud and frostbitten vegetation. It wasn't until later that I glimpsed a tangle of wires and posts in the corner, assuming them to be a form of backup generator. Little did I know they were the infrastructure for an unexpected vineyard. Fast forward to May, and my dormant quarter-acre had erupted into a jungle of growth. Clueless about gardening, I found myself facing a bewildering array of blossoms, vines, and fruits, far beyond my bonsai skills back in Philadelphia. Desperate for help, I turned to a local gardener named Dominique, despite the language barrier. Over the following decade, I embarked on a crash course in viticulture and horticulture, transforming from a novice to a seasoned gardener. My once barren land now yields a bounty from April to November, and I've become a familiar sight in the neighborhood, armed with surplus zucchinis in August. Though I may never match Dominique's intuitive understanding of plants, I've learned to communicate my gardening woes effectively. And while I still chuckle at my initial bewilderment, I now face the winter months with anticipation, eagerly planning for the explosion of growth in spring. Perhaps this year, amidst the flowers and edibles, I'll plant a little wisteria for nostalgia's sake. This has been The Last Word by Christy Page at greenprints.com.
Thank you for listening to GardenDC. You can become a listener supporter for as little as 99 cents a month by going to the supporter link in our show notes or directly to podcasters.spotify.com/pod/show/GardenDC/support. Another way to support this podcast is to subscribe to our monthly digital publication, Washington Gardener Magazine. To do so, go to WashingtonGardener.com or WashingtonGardener.blogspot.com. You can find Washington Gardener on social media at WDC Gardener on Twitter or X, Instagram, and Pinterest, and on Facebook at Washington Gardener Magazine. And be sure to leave us a 5-star review on your favorite podcast platform. Please take a minute to share us on social media with #GardenDC so other gardeners can find us too.